Hi,
Hi.
Suzanne. Hi.
Hi.
So,
All right.
um, there's a concept that we did not really discuss in the previous video. So, we are going to discuss that concept in this one, and that is closely related to the concept of ontological pluralism, which you, I think, defined quite nicely as epistemic humility. And there's something related to epistemic humility that we wanted to discuss but did not. So we're taking
Right.
this opportunity to meet with all of y'all again and explore that related concept as well. So, Suzanne,
Right. Right. So after we closed the last recording, we were just talking and it came up that epistemic humility in and of itself is not broad enough or full enough, and that closely tied to that is ethical humility. And so we start talking about that, and just that in itself seemed like something to go ahead and record a discussion of. Um, so when we recognize that no matter how knowledgeable we are, there's always more to know. Um, and we're teachable and we're open to learning and seeing new perspectives, etc. That, is the essence of epistemic humility. Of course, ontological pluralism as an approach would involve ethical humility just as much as the epistemic humility. And Radvaj and I were talking about, just those two things, and it's just an interesting thing to think about in terms of, how are they relate to one another, um, and so forth. And so that's why we thought we would just make another slightly shorter recording about those two things. Given that with ontological pluralism, there is no final truth, no one truth, etc., one all-encompassing perspective. No, being is the inexhaustible source. At the same time, we have to acknowledge that any kind of perspective involving ethics and morality itself is limited necessarily. And so, with questions about right and wrong, ethics, morals, and so forth, we must retain our humility and our willingness to be teachable, so that we can recognize uh, other perspectives, points of view, etc., that are part of the larger discussion. Um, so,
so
with that, did you have something in mind in particular?
yes, so just to tie this in with epistemic humility. So with epistemic humility, we said that uh, we recognize that knowledge is limited and finite, interpretation is limited and finite, the meanings that govern our lives are finite and limited. In the same way, then, um, our evaluative sphere, the sphere of our evaluations, um, the value judgments that we make uh, regarding things that we know, which we deem as good or bad, um, or good or evil, those also are limited judgments. So just like my um, interpretation of truth, interpretation of fact, let's say, just for the sake of simplicity, just as my interpretation of fact is limited, finite, my evaluation of that fact that I just interpreted must also be finite and limited, or we should recognize its finitude, because all our evaluations also come from our situatedness, uh, the limited sphere that we traverse, going back to the traversing of the widest orbit. So, recognition of this finite situatedness must then make us sensitive to other ways in which these judgments can be made and often are made. So that's how we could, um, for now, define ethical humility along with epistemic humility, and they are not like completely separate things.
Right.
They go together in many ways.
Right.
And so, but there is also some distinctions to be made, and those distinctions are interesting. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think what jumped to my mind about it was, for example, taking a, you take a class on ethical theory, right? And so, the three major ones, right? We look at that, for example, we've got utilitarianism, where what we focus on are the consequences of actions and do those promote the greatest quality happiness for the greatest number of people? Or we have something like Kant's deontological ethical theory, where there is a set of duties that we can understand through reason alone, the proper use of reason, that will direct us on what we should and should not do, what is and is not right and wrong,
Right.
or something more, even more complicated, like a virtue theory of ethics, where you know virtues can manifest differently in different individuals, and what always matters for an ethical assessment, if you will, is the context of the situation and the character of a given person. So, to me, just the fact that there's these three competing major ethical theories, it demonstrates, I think, a priori, that we do need not just the epistemic humility, but the ethical humility.
Yes.
Because certainly, if we're thinking beings and we study these theories, we can recognize, if you will, the positive nature of each theory, even though
Mm.
sometimes they can be in direct conflict with one another. Um, Likewise, you take someone like Levinas, for whom ethics is first philosophy. So, not to try to go too deep into living on there, but right and wrong or ethics, if you will, what is ethical is not actually derived through reason, nor is it derived through some calculative means like you would with a utilitarian evaluation. But rather it's the face of the other, the literal face, body, elbow, or what have you of another being. It comes to mind Martin Buber, and
Mm.
I believe he references his cat. And you can look at your cat as an it, or you can look at your cat as a thou, a you, a being with intrinsic value. And I would say Levinas and Buber share something there, that the ethics, if you will, is it precedes, it's
Mm.
prior to these things that we might call epistemic, or that we certainly would couch as rational, reasoned things. And again, it's not even about saying, oh, I like that one theory better than the other. It's about just the fundamental recognition that ethics, the ethical, is itself multifaceted, um, many faceted, and that no matter how many theories that have been articulated, written down, or discussed,
Mm.
there is going to be further thinking to be done on the matter. And so that can give us pause, not with just what we claim to know, but with what we claim might be right or wrong, good or bad, etc. um, and so, yeah, it's not that we're trying to lay out how those two things are connected per se, but rather that they clearly are
Mm.
connected, ethical and epistemic humility.
It's also, one thing that strikes me is that the ethical is, in fact, it demands more pluralism, because what is more difficult than defining the good? I mean, I mean, I don't mean this literally, but it's much easier to define what is correct or what is right. It isn't, but what I mean is, I mean, it is complicated, but then it's even more complicated to define what is good. And
Right.
the entire field of meta ethics is trying to figure this out and hasn't, and in a way cannot, because
Right.
inherently the good is, I mean, if we want to go all the way back to Plato, the good is beyond being. And
Right.
we could reinterpret that as the good being prior to being, and then the
Hmm.
Levinasian interpretation that somehow ethics comes first
Hmm.
might then be even connected to Plato. But
Right.
the good being beyond being, the good being that much more difficult, and the good then allowing for this multiplicity demands from us this pluralism even more, is what I think. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say then that actually from this conversation and the conversation we were having just before we started to record, I would say that ethical humility in a way precedes epistemic humility.
Right.
I would say that epistemic humility is an ethical posture in itself.
Right.
So,
I think that's good. And
yeah,
I mean, in the moment, and again, for viewers, um, everything both Ashwash and I are doing are in the
yeah,
moment, and there
yeah.
is no scripting. So, sometimes we may, go forward and then track back a bit or something. Um, but it's, we're trying to practice public philosophy and do it in the moment and think with each other and with viewers. But I inclined in this moment to agree with you completely that because I was thinking about that after we were talking about epistemic humility, and I'm like, well, yeah, because if you think of a group, any group, pick a group who has a fundamentalist kind of view, and they believe that they have the truth,
Hmm.
right? They have it. Obviously, they don't have epistemic humility. Um, it is often the case that they then will look the other way on things that most of us might see as completely unethical, the harming of
Yeah.
certain people or what have you. And so it almost makes me think of an infinity symbol, and that there's truly a feedback loop there, because ancient Greeks, the one fatal flaw that the gods will punish you for is hubris.
Hubris.
And,
Yeah.
and what is hubris but that insistence that you have the truth? It's an unwillingness to recognize that you might be wrong. It's a certain kind of arrogance. Um, and I know that in the past I thought of it as epistemic, and now I'm really thinking that it's maybe in a more rudimentary sense, or at the root, if you will, if you want to use a metaphor of a plant or something, that is an ethical posture
Yeah.
that first allows a person to even be willing to say, hey, I might be wrong, or
Yeah.
just that my view is limited. And so I'm open to a broader view and other views. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm currently teaching a course on critical thinking to undergraduates, first year, first semester, in fact. And a standard textbook of critical thinking will give you a lot of tools. So these are the fallacies, and each fallacy has a definition, a Latin name, and we should avoid these fallacies. Then we have to be, we should try and develop a certain kind of mindset. And that mindset, sure, all that is good. All that is
Mhm.
fine. But unless we have a willingness to adopt this information is useless to me. So
Right.
unless there's this ethical posture, unless there is at least um, the sense for fairness, I'm not going to use any of these rules that my critical thinking textbook gives me. So
Right.
one
Or,
example, yeah, and as I was saying, this one thing that came to my mind is a game of chess. So
mhm,
I can know how to make the right moves in the right way. So I can know how the knight must move on that board. But this knowledge is premised on the condition that neither of us playing the game are going to like turn the board, um we're gonna, or are going to like throw away the pieces in a fit of rage when we are losing.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the precondition. And
Right.
that is not knowledge. That's an ethical decision, or
Right.
an
A
ethical
posture. I like your
yes,
posture.
posture.
The ethical
Yes,
posture makes me think of a comportment, our
yes,
comportment toward things.
yes.
Um, and you're
And there's
talking about
also
critical thinking.
yeah, but just one. There's also a trust that
Mhm.
the players must have in the other. That
Yes.
when the moment comes that you're losing your queen, you're losing your bishops, and you know that the king is going to be checkmated, there is a trust that you will follow through and not not abandon. I mean,
Right.
you could actually resign, but not that you would
Right.
allow the game to reach its conclusion. It's on the basis
Right.
of this trust that the knowledge of the pieces even work. So
Right.
that,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And that trust, it brings to mind a couple things. The principle of charity,
yeah,
right? In philosophy, one of the most, if not the basic principle, that will listen to the
yeah,
argument of the other with an aim towards understanding them the best that I'm able and
yeah.
interpret them in that manner. That's that trust there. And I also think of how when you said you were teaching the critical thinking, because I teach it almost every semester, and because you can provide students with these tools, if you will, and then they can use them in a way that is not embodying the posture, the
Yeah.
ethical posture. Rather, it's sophistry, and
Mm,
sophistry right now is pretty hot
mm,
because tools of rhetoric, tools of reasoning can be wielded in varying ways, and the essence of sophistry is sort of this sophistication with words and tools, but in a way to manipulate and control people, and which is not at all in keeping with ontological pluralism or
mm.
principle of charity or philosophy as the love of wisdom at all.
Right.
Um, and one more thing I wanted to say is when you were talking, it actually reminded me when I did my master's degree, we had a professor, and he was just he was the logic master. That was his specialization was logic, and but he was a wonderful human being. And I remember just him stopping mid lecture. I was actually his TA at this
Hmm.
point, and he's teaching undergrads. And he said, "Look, when it comes down to it, you can be smart logically. That's not enough." He
Mm,
said, "I'll take a truly kind person who's not logical any day of the week over a logical person who is unkind."
mm,
And now that I'm thinking about it, that goes with what we're talking about here, in that the ethical posture not only might be what's required so that we can put to proper use our reasoning skills, our critical thinking skills, but it may in fact be the more basic
more
thing, the
basic. Yeah.
comportment,
Mm,
um, or the posture
mm.
that's needed. So that was
So,
really good how those things came together.
and I love that statement from the professor because it reminds me of something um, that the Jewish theologian, rabbi, philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel said. I don't know where he says this, but he says somewhere that when I was young, I used to admire smart people, intelligent people. But now that I'm older, I admire kind people. And it's the same kind of territory in which we are
Right,
at. So then, yeah, maybe ontological pluralism is fundamentally an ethical posture, and posture is indeed a good word for this. So that's the basic, that's the foundational thing. It's ethics. Then on the basis of that, do you um, go into the realm
right,
of the epistemic? So yeah, this was a good addendum, and
right.
yeah, given that we are doing this off the cuff, and we're not scripting this or anything, so we did not discuss this in the previous one. And then we had a wonderful discussion after the recording stopped, and then we
Right,
thought of, adding this to the previous one. So this will come out as a part B to the first one. So yeah.
right. So
Anything else
great. I'm so
that
glad. I'm glad we did
Yeah,
that.
me too,
Um,
me too, me too. So
and it's
anything
a
more
lot of,
that, sorry?
no, I was just going to say, it all, uh, I feel like all the conversations then just really like, if you will, seed the earth for further conversations,
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
different ideas and such. And so look forward, look forward to the next one.
Yes, yes. Like and subscribe, everyone.
Yes,
And
please
share.
like and subscribe and
Yeah.
share. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye. Thank you. Yes.
Bye.